Good day, everyone, and welcome back to the Intelligent Automation World Series, now day 3 of our 4-day event. My name is Rochelle Hood, and I have the pleasure of serving as the chairwoman for this week's event. And in my daily life, I get to serve all of you as the global head of customer analytics and research. And through that research, one of the things that I learned as you were filling out your profiling questions, and many of you who participated in our annual survey, is that data, and what do you do with that data? How do you analyze it? And how do you take full advantage of it with something that many of you are needing some help with and ask for assistance. As a matter of fact, when we were talking about the things that limited your ability for your organization to scale automation, the biggest thing about that, 41.57% of you said it was data management, inefficient data, not structured data. We don't know how to use it. We don't have a plan in place, and therefore we really can't take advantage of some of the higher level automation things. So with that feedback and so much more, that's part of what we've crafted in the agenda this week, and in particular in this session. You are going to have the wonderful opportunity to hear from somebody who has spent more than 3 decades in this analytics space. Not often is that the case. So I'm going to put you on the edge of your seats and then walk you over to a couple of quick logistics before I introduce our speaker. On your audience view screen, you're going to see a Q&A box. Please use that if you experience any technical issues, if you have any questions related to the conference. But also, we do have only a few slides because we want to spend most of our time talking to you. What questions do you have? What challenges are you experiencing? Maybe something that's worked for you that you'd like to share with the group. Use that box to be able to begin that collaboration and get the most out of this session by getting your issues addressed. Secondly, you're going to see the photo of our speaker next door, and I can tell you he has thousands and thousands of followers on LinkedIn, and you should join that. It is now one of my top, I must read his post today. I put it on my smart reads list because I find it very interesting, but more importantly, very useful. So please do reach out to him. Add John to your digital networking by clicking on the social buttons directly below his name. You'll have my information there too if you have any other feedback or thoughts about this session or anything else for the conference. And then below that, a couple of resources. First of all, I talked about our own data. We have an intelligent automation market report that we do twice a year. This is the half 2 2019 report that just came out in December. And so that was kind of a meaty, really guidance to specific information in intelligent automation. And then the second one is our annual State of the Industry. This is how, for more than 10 years, we have surveyed our entire global member base, and great metrics, good data for you to pull from for your presentations, for business cases, for benchmarking, and so much more. Please use that. And then you're going to hear so many wonderful things about book number 1 from our speaker today. I'm going to draw some direct examples out of it. If you decide it's something that you'd like to take advantage of yourself, I've given you a quick link so that you can look at the details of the book, and maybe that's a great gift for someone on your team who's developing analytic skills. So with all of those logistics out of the way, I have really been delighted to get to know John a bit more in this process, and certainly I can tell you he's one of the greatest experts I've worked with in the analytics space, and I am eager to hear all of his tips on how we move up the value chain with advanced analytics and AI. It's my pleasure to welcome John Thompson, who is the Global Head of Advanced Analytics and AI at CSL Behring, to the stage. John, welcome to the digital stage. Over to you.
Thank you, Rochelle. What a wonderful introduction and a great start to the session. I hope everybody's feeling well today in whatever time zone you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm sure we have people all over the world, and I'm thrilled to be here. Rochelle has been a fantastic guide to this process and someone who has raised my level of excitement in being part of this virtual conference. So welcome to everybody, and thank you, Rochelle. We're going to talk through just a few slides, not many. I've got 6 slides, 8 in total with a intro slide and a Q&A slide, so 6, not too many to go through. And as Rochelle said, I have spent the last 37 years working in advanced analytics, all the way from the early days of business intelligence and data warehousing, all the way up to today, where, as Rochelle said, I lead the global advanced analytics and artificial intelligence team at CSL Behring, which is the 3rd largest biopharmaceutical company in the world. So we do all sorts of interesting analytics and tie that to automation and use them in tandem together throughout our company, throughout almost every functional area and in every geography you can consider. So we're going to talk through some high-level concepts and talk into some possible stories, and then we'll open it up. Rochelle has picked a few things, as she said, as she implied, my first book. I'm in the middle of writing my second book. So let's jump into it and start talking about analytics and automation. So the first thing that I wanted to bring to everybody's understanding and realization is that when you're building real-world analytical applications and automated processes, they're almost like bringing oil and water together. And as we know, that can be a volatile mix, or maybe flame and dynamite is probably a better metaphor. But when you're looking at the slide and you're starting on the left-hand side, analytical models and analytical applications are usually driven by the art of the possible. It's a very creative process. You're designing, testing, and building analytical solutions, and that is best done away from production processes. You really want to have an open mind about the wide range of data that you can use, the analytical processes you might want to undertake, whether it's descriptive statistics or predictive analytics, optimization, simulation. Those things are usually best done in an unconstrained manner. And you've got a young lady there with her arms crossed by a chart. That's representative of what I call an artisanal data science team, where you have people who are highly qualified, who are handling everything from data acquisition through feature engineering and modeling and presentation and stakeholder management and moving models into production as well. So that's one type of analytical team that you could have. Below is more of a factory or a modular-based approach where you have a significant number of people. Those people are focused on individual specific tasks like data acquisition, feature engineering, and modeling. You have different groups doing that. And then I've put a brick wall in there because I like to have that strong barrier between that. Because what I've found in the past is the automated processes, if we're building through our robotic process automation or just automating in an old-fashioned way, these are driven by reality, regulatory requirements, production necessities, business cycles. And if you end up blending or bleeding over the process side into the analytical model side, what you do is you tend to dampen the creativity, and you end up with the analytical side of the world not achieving its potential. So that's the first thing I wanted to bring up is that, these are two different worlds. One is very creative, one is very process-oriented, and they're best kept apart in the early days. Now, once you have the analytical, models built and you're ready to move into production, a lot of the times you're going to end up with, the different discussion on the analytical side. It's, how quickly does the world represented by the data change and what happens to those models that you've put into production. That time frame is completely divorced, again, from the automated processes. Sometimes we'll have conversations whereby, we look at the analytical models and they don't need to be refreshed more than a year in some cycles. But when you look at the production, let's talk about a financial system. Those financial systems have monthly close, quarterly close, annual close. Those are very hard deadlines and cycles that need to be met. They are not fungible. They're not flexible. You can't move them around. So often you will get the people on the business side, on the automated process side, pushing for things to happen on the analytical side when they really don't match up. Sometimes people think they do match up, and in some cases they actually do line up quite nicely, but that's not really the case. So again, you want to look closely on the analytical side of the world, the analytical cycles, and you want to look at how fast the external world changes. Your data that you're supposed to be using or you should be using in your analytical world is a representation of the physical world. So you can tell how fast by what the physical world is doing, how fast you need to refresh your data and retrain your models and things like that. So they do integrate at this point. Your analytical models do work together with your automated processes. But again, they're two separate worlds, and they need to be kept, at an arm's length from each other. They do intertwine, but you want the considerations for the automated side and the analytical side to be different and thought of in a different way. All right. So I hinted at this in the first slide. There's two different points, two ends of a continuum when you're building analytics teams. And I talked about this a little bit in my first book, and I talk about it a lot in my second book. The advanced analytics teams, you have the artisanal side of the world, and that's where you have a small number, a handful of highly trained, highly qualified individuals that are taking care of all these duties that are in the middle part of the slide. You usually want to do that if you're not going to hire, more than 5 to 10 people. If you want them to be working on high-value analytical applications, and if those kind of applications are something you think you might be able to patent, they're proprietary, and you would probably want to protect them in some way. Now, on the other side of the equation, the other main approach is the modular approach, and that's, as I said, where you're hiring, 4 or 5 people that are doing data acquisition, 4 or 5 people that are doing feature engineering. Your modeling is probably going to be done by your artisanal team, but then again, you may have, some entry-level modelers in your modelers in your modular team, and then you'll have people that are doing presentations, data visualization, and different types of tasks like that. Now, what I've seen over the past 30 years is that you usually start on one end or the other. You decide that you're going to have a modular approach, or you decide that you're going to start out with an artisanal approach. And then over time, what happens is you merge them together. You blend them. So you'll have your artisanal team that's doing the high-value work, working on those, like I said, proprietary, patentable, protected applications that you want. Your modular team will be doing more of the, crank it through, get the data, integrate the data, do feature engineering, and maybe some of the analytical models that are in some of the more well done or well versed or well worn areas like supply chain efficiency or some of those kind of things. So you end up starting on one end or the other, and you move towards the middle, and you have a hybrid approach. So these things can happen rather rapidly. In my current role, I have a artisanal team and have had for the last almost coming up on 2 years. We are now starting to move into the modular approach and bringing those together. And I would say in the next year, we will have a hybrid approach. So it's one of those things that, the hybrid approach or the modular approach, often you may even have automation individuals in that group, people that are doing process automation. So that group can have more functionality in it than just advanced analytics teams. They can be taking advanced analytics concepts and bringing them together and doing the automation or the integration that we talked about in the first couple slides. All right. So some of the discussion points that I want to make sure that we take away from the first part of this discussion is that the analytical teams are dynamic and need to grow and evolve, and you really need to spend time working with those folks, because one of the things I've learned over the multiple decades I've been doing this, and I say this with all sorts of love and respect, is that the people in the analytics groups, the modular and the artisanal people are special snowflakes. They need to be respected. They need to be nurtured. They need to be worked with in a specific way. And that's really the topic of my second book, is why are analytical teams different than all the other teams that you work with, teams that do major construction projects or teams that do software development. Analytics teams are just different. That's all there is to it. The next discussion point is that you are really taking a very creative and artistic process, and you are grafting that together with a very mechanistic process. And that's more challenging than what it would look like on the surface. And there are many instances of where processes and projects blow up at this point, and don't move any further. This is a real friction point that needs to be understood. And then the third point is the one we just talked about a few moments ago, synchronizing the needs of the analytical cycle and the needs of production cycles are different. And you can't let the production cycle demand or drive or change the analytics process. If you do, that's one way you're going to dampen the creativity and the value of the exercise that's going on. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. So analytics as a value creator. One of the things that I talk about a lot over the last couple years is that we often find companies that talk about analytics in the sense of projects. And we do need projects. We have to have projects so we can all understand what we're focused on, how we assign resources, how we manage things, how we apply costs. You know, we need projects. There's no doubt about it. But if your organization is focused on projects, I can guarantee that you and your organization will not be gaining the value from analytics that you could. You really should be talking about analytics and intelligent automation of processes as a organizational process. Now, you know, I've been talking about this for a long time, and the definition might be subtle, and some people might be shaking their heads and say, this doesn't make any sense. But if you really think about it, it does make a lot of sense, is that if your organization is committed to this as a strategic initiative, and they are looking at it from funding it and undertaking it and being committed to it as a multi-year process, you will have greater success. I just saw a article in the MIT Press from Tom Davenport that said organizations that have dedicated analytics teams focused on innovation and transformation, I think the number was an 87% chance more, had an 87% chance of success compared to organizations that do not. So it's a subtle difference, but rather than thinking about a project or a portfolio of projects, think about this as a process, an overarching process that helps. I try to stay away from the word transformation because it has a lot of loaded meanings in it at this point, but it really is about innovation and transforming the organization through analytics and intelligent automation. So let's sum up this part where I'm standing here talking, down a microphone at you, and get towards a part where it's a more dynamic discussion. So, to recap the few points that we've made here, analytics is a creative activity. It's driven by creative thinking, trial and error. It's very, very tied or similar to innovation and discovery, and it's delivered by a unique team. Intelligent automation, it can be a dramatic improvement in operations. It is tightly tied to process and operations, and it's usually delivered by a highly trained, very disciplined team. Especially in an organization like CSL Behring, we are manufacturing life-saving therapies. When people are doing process automation and automating different manufacturing, distribution, supply chain processes, we don't do that in a very slapdash way. We do it in a very controlled, certified, and validated manner, and we take that very seriously. So analytics and intelligent automation both can be starting points. I hear some people say, well, you have to do the analytics first. Other people say, no, you must do the automation first. It's not really an either-or proposition. You can do both. And you can start different projects in either of those starting positions. So, if people are arguing, for one way or another, it's usually because they have an agenda, and that's fine, as long as you understand where you want to go through the process and where you want to get to. So, as I said, they can exist separately or together, and they do deliver the most value when they're combined in a synergistic way. So, as I said, and as Rochelle said, I wanted to just cover a few slides, set the context for this discussion, and open it up and see what kind of questions you had and have more of a dialogue at this point. So, Rochelle?
Okay, fantastic. So we're going to go through some questions I've extracted from the book. But first, early bird gets the worm. I want to compliment Anita. She was the very first person to send a question in right away. And so we're going to go to that, and then we'll go start through some of the journey in the book. Anita would like to know, analytical teams, is your prediction or your vision that at some point they could be completely replaced by advanced AI?
There's a fair amount of discussion about that right now, that AI will replace, lots of different things. And I do agree that things that are simple, things that are repetitive are being replaced by AI today, and more will be replaced by AI. One thing that we do, that I believe in the long term, is that AI, in the end, the most value from AI will be an augmentation of human capacities. People are very good at ambiguity. They're very good at deciding between, similar things, and they're very good at the softer side of decision sciences. Judith Hurwitz and Henry Morris just released a book a couple months ago called Augmented Intelligence. So I really believe that the long-term future of AI is an augmentation of human capabilities. So I see the two working together quite closely and quite well. The lower end of the spectrum, you're absolutely right. That will be automated away. The higher end, softer skills, I don't see that happening for a couple hundred years.
All right, we're all safe. We still exist. That's good to know. Okay, I'm going to walk you through a little bit of a journey of the book, just because I find this book to be more of a guide of actual useful tools, something I keep pulling off the shelves much more than John's theory on the way that things are done. So I think this will be hopefully a very valuable journey for you. So in Chapter 1, you're talking about competitive advantages stemming from analytics. What I found useful and interesting about this is, and this really goes to changing mindsets and developing a different culture if you want to take the most advantage of analytics. In here, you focused a lot on opportunities, using analytics as a competitive advantage, thinking about it, understanding your markets and analysis. Now, often people think about that at the enterprise level for external customers. I believe there's so much untapped resource when we're talking about our shared services, global business services team, about how we can enable that, because we own all the data domains. We own customer master, vendor master, product master, all kinds of things. We own or manage and shared services. So, but most people just think about it as looking at numbers and reflecting on something, reporting trends, that type of thing, not so much about creating opportunities and really thinking about that outcome, the analytics from your data, making the bridge to a competitive advantage. So as you explored that and you went through some of the use cases, would you comment on that? And do you think this is still an underutilized aspect of analytics, is to look at it from the opportunity perspective?
I think that's a great question, and the short answer is yes. The way I look at it is that analytics should be driving innovation around people, processes, and products. So, we should be looking at our internal operations, manufacturing efficiency, supply chain efficiency. We should certainly be looking at that and trying to determine how best to raise the level of our operational effectiveness. We should be looking at our people. We've done over in my current role and over the past couple roles, we've done different AI applications where we've looked at the success of different people after they've been promoted, and looking and trying to understand what are the characteristics of people when you have 3, 4, 5 candidates that you could promote, who's the one that has the most probable success of being promoted. And then products. At Dell, we did a great job of this. Michael, over the years that Dell has been in business, he always understood and still understands the value of data. And we have taken we took the data when I was at Dell, and we created new products for Dell from the data that we had in the environment, the life cycle of a laptop, the failure rates, the overall experience that a user would have with a certain type of device. So we were able to create all sorts of new products from that drove service-based products that were higher in margin for Dell. And I really think people can do more with analytics if they open up their aperture and think about it from those 3 Ps: people, processes, and products. Those are great ways to innovate in your organization and using the data, as you said, Rochelle, that you already have to do it.
Yeah, I'll add one comment on there. I was just doing a review with one of our C-level folks from one of the largest supermarket chains, retailers in Asia and the UK, and they have just moved to a model where a lot of their support for their stores is now done out of region. So the UK support, for example, is going to be done in India, and he was saying that I feel like our support has gone way up and the customer experience has changed dramatically as a result of not being there in the store. And I'm like, okay, I don't follow this. I'm not agreeing. It was all based on analytics. They were looking at all of the things that they could proactively prevent, like something scanning the incorrect barcode being on it, what causes people to wait in line the most amount of time. That team was dedicated to look at all of that and then preventing that to increase the customer experience. Who would have thought that analytics far away from the customer touch point would have been, a driving factor? So I thought a most brilliant example of creating an opportunity from something that stemmed from analytics.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should have let you comment on that.
No, I think that's insightful. It's one of the things that we've done here at CSL is that the entire analytics team has no experience in biopharmaceuticals. And what that allows us to do, just like the example you gave at the UK retailer, the UK grocery store, is that we don't come in with any preconceived notions of how these drugs are made, manufactured, how they're used, how patients react to them, how our supply chain works. So we come in with a naive openness and ask questions that, there are people here that have 20, 25 years experience, look at us and go, oh, we never thought of it that way.
Interesting. So continuing on to Chapter 1, you have talked about inflection points and 3 major trends. I'm not going to share what they all are because I do want people to read the book, but one of the 3 was the rise of the citizen data scientist. I had an opportunity at our Latin America event to go spend some time with the Merck team in Costa Rica and talk to all their citizen data scientists. And these were people who started as an AP clerk. They might have been doing master data management, that type of thing. And they were just beaming with pride that they now have I'll say, a badge, even though it wasn't a physical badge, that says, I'm an enterprise architect, I'm a data scientist. They shared with me some of the things that they thought was most impactful from having that program, which I might bring to you all in another webinar. But John, from your perspective, why do you see this as a trend, and what's going to be some of the key benefits from developing citizen data scientist type of structure?
It's a great question, and it is it's one of those waves that is so ubiquitous that I think people are actually missing it because it's just everywhere. It's kind of like the fish being in water. You don't notice it because that's just what you live in. I see all the way down to the high school level. I work on the STEM advisory board of our local high school, and we're teaching analytics in the high school level and then through the college level. So people are coming into the workforce being very digitally literate, very data literate, very math capable. And, we're actually moving to a place where almost everybody in the organization at certain levels has an analytical component to their job. So I think that, it's almost like the citizen data scientist wave is going to crest, and then analytics will just be a basic capability that are in all these different roles. One of the things that I've done in a couple different jobs that I've had recently is that I've created internal sites whereby we have a community of practice. We have a few hundred people around the world in that community of practice. We break that up into special interest groups. And in those special interest groups, we create upskilling centers. So people who are in finance that are working with spreadsheets, who want to upskill themselves and learn Python or R, We put together a 101 class that we build internally, and then we source 201, 301, and 401 classes from Coursera and leading universities like Michigan and MIT and Stanford, and we allow those people to self-pace themselves through those classes, and they can actually move from one level to another. And we see, as you said, Rochelle, a fair amount of pride in people that have said, hey, I was working on the FP&A closing, and have been doing that for the last 5 years. Now I'm confident, and I'm certified as a data scientist, and I'm going to go, possibly move into a different area. So the citizen data scientist is a great concept, and I think we're moving into an era where it's just going to be everybody's job to have those skills.
Well, fantastic, and I'm glad to hear that the same pride exists there with your team, and perhaps we'll interview them and have both teams together. I think that might be a very interesting session to hold.
Sure.
So we're advancing along in the book, page number 40, for those of you who might be following along, where you're talking about it's not just about the data, and there is a paragraph particularly that says, the data just continues to grow and grow and grow. We have lakes, we have all these other things, big data, all this types of stuff, but that's just ones and zeros. This is really, it only proliferates in volume, but not necessarily in insights. It's really the critical piece that says, how do you put this to business expertise? In particular, Dawn, I would say that this is something I feel like so many of the organizations we deal with in our member base are still struggling with. We came up through, whether it's HR or IT or finance, in very reporting type roles, reporting out KPIs, reporting out business objectives, reporting out the numbers and volumes of things that have happened, rather than being able to pause and take the time and put some context to that, much less get to the next level to predict. Hoping that the tools are taking away all the time it takes to just crunch the numbers and bring everything together, and we can start to shift into that. What else do you think holds us back from this, or what's the magic sauce to be able to get past the data and really into business expertise and the outcomes and conclusions and analysis as the strengths, not just the amount of things that we have in some big data lake?
That's a great question. I'll put a little context around it, and then I'll answer the question. We have seen, my research has shown, and my observations have shown that what has happened over the last 10 years, 5, 6, 7, it has been accelerating, is that we are gathering more and more data. That's obvious. There's no insight in that statement, but the math that we've been using was created, some of it was created in the 1800s, the 1900s, as early as the 1950s. That math hasn't changed a whole lot. There are people that are innovating in math. That's not what I'm saying. But the core of the math has been around for a long time, hundreds of years in some cases. But what we found now is with the acceleration of the speed of data and the volume of data, now we can apply that math in a way that the insights are generated almost instantaneously. So it's a marriage of the math and the scale and the velocity of the data. So that gives us, an environment to work in. And then we end up understanding, we've gotten a much better understanding, that analytics is a team sport. I saw that Bill Schmarzo, the Dean of Big Data, posted on LinkedIn yesterday that he was now going out and saying that data science and data analytics was a true team sport, and I couldn't agree more. What we see, and when we're the most successful, is when we take our advanced analytics teams that are focused on math and data and algorithms and approaches, and we marry them together with subject matter experts who understand financial systems, manufacturing systems, vertical applications like biopharmaceuticals or consumer hard goods or soft goods. When we bring those teams together, and sometimes we bring in the IT teams as well, and we have that either 2-part or 3-part collaboration, that's when you really get the value coming out of the organization or of the effort. It's often that we will work together. We'll have our analytics teams, our advanced analytics staff get together with some of the subject matter experts. We'll have some initial conversations. we'll come back and present our first cut at the models, and they'll say, the subject matter experts, their reaction will be, that's great work, but we forgot to tell you about this, or we overlooked that, or you didn't think about this. And then we go back and go, oh yeah, okay, we didn't think about the seasonality, or we didn't think about hurricanes in Florida, or some other impinging external factor. We bring that in, and then we iterate, going back and forth between the analytics teams and the subject matter experts and the IT professionals, and we end up with something that is just so much better than any one of us could have done. So just to sum it up, you've got the data, which is growing and moving along quickly. You've got the math that's been around for a long time. But to really bring that to bear and deliver value, you need to have a team, and that team needs to collaborate closely to build these analytical applications.
Okay, fantastic. Now that's going to lead into the next question, which is Chapter 5, where we talk about analytics takes a village. So building and enabling the right team. So perfect segue. But one of the things that you talk about here is that bringing that team together in an analytics center of excellence. I like the fact that you really offer both the roles. You talked about a couple different structures that are available that people could consider. But one thing I wanted to talk about bringing the roles together, I saw all the usual suspects here. I've got a Python expert. I've got people who know the vendor's tools really well. I got a couple other language experts, but what I loved that took a half a page of description was the visualization expert. Can you talk about why that particular role is so important, and maybe why some people miss that and that holds them back from really powerful analytics being put into practice?
Great question, Rochelle. It's one of those things that we as analytics professionals tend to, forget that we are very specialist individuals. We're very specialist people. We live amongst math and data. We're a small subset of the population, and certainly a small subset of the corporate environment as well. And what happens often, and I've seen it happen many times, and I finally learned my lesson, is that it's important that you put your results into a format where everyday people can connect with it, whether that's someone in manufacturing, a process engineer at a plant, or an executive running a supply chain, or an executive running a sales team. It's important that you're able to visualize your results in a way that your end users can connect with it. We had an example here where we had built a really impactful, wonderful application that has made a bottom line difference to CSL in a really, really great way. And when the team built it and they did the presentation for me and showed me the output of the application, I let them go through it, and I stopped and I said, well, who do you think is really excited by the presentation and the output that you've shown me? And they stopped and they thought for a minute and they said, well, we are. And I said, yeah, you are, and I am. But the end users will not understand this at all. And they said, yeah, you're right. So they went back and they rewrote their presentation. They completely revised the output, the data visualization of the application. And when we went and showed it to the users, they stopped us about 5 minutes into the presentation and said, you nailed it. This is our world. We now understand exactly where our operations can be improved and made more efficient and optimized. So visualization is crucial for your success. And it shouldn't be as an afterthought. And most of us do that. We've all done it. We've worked hard. We want people to understand all the hard work we've done on integrating the data and doing feature engineering, how smart we are in the modeling choices we've made. But if they can't connect with it, then it's kind of all for naught. So visualization is something that is crucial to the success of your projects.
Okay, thanks for that. And before I go on to the next chapter, I'm going to jump over and take a couple of audience questions real quick. The first one from Christian, how would you approach integrating an inaugural data scientist into the product development cycle for an organization that is just starting to approach building an analytics team?
Okay, that's a great question. Thanks, Christian. We here and I have a strong belief that we hire, we have people do internships with us. So we bring in young people and have them do at least 2 internships, maybe 3, over a year and a half to 2 years. And we give them real work. I'm a big believer in that if you have someone that you think is worthy of being on your team, then they should get real work the day they step in, whether they're an intern or if they're an entry-level hire or they're an experienced hire. And there's no better way for them to get integrated into the team than them asking their coworkers who have been there a while, what's up with this data? I've never seen this before. I don't understand the patterns that I'm seeing here. This is counterintuitive. So as I said, data science is a team sport. And the best way for people to get integrated into the team is for them to understand that everybody works together on every project. You may have 2 primary projects, but all your coworkers have their primary projects. But you may have an expertise in natural language processing, and someone else may be an expert in neural nets. You won't be an expert in everything, but the way that you'll get integrated into the team is to have the weekly meetings, the biweekly one-on-ones, the technical team meetings where the leader isn't there and everybody's just sitting down and going, I just can't figure this out. Why am I having this problem? So it's a lot of communication, and it's meaningful work right away. I think those are 2 critical factors to getting someone tucked into the team as fast as possible.
Wonderful. My next 2 quotes of the day: analytics is a team sport, and give them real work day one. Love it. So one more audience question, and then we'll go on. We'll go back to the book. Gareth would like to know, you made that comment earlier about analytics teams are often artistic and needed to be treated differently. Can you talk a little bit about that statement and what you mean by that?
Yeah, sometimes, that's misinterpreted, and thank you for the clarifying question. I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit more about this subject. In the early days, when you look back at the days of Grace Hopper and the folks that were coming into programming, they were almost all coming from either math or liberal sciences and arts. So, there's a long history of people coming into the programming and the analytical realm who are very creative. Now, my art usually consists of stick figures. I'm pretty bad in the visual arts, but I do think of myself as a very creative person when I write code. So I wouldn't think of, people in the team as being Van Gogh or Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo, but they are very creative individuals, and they do tend to work on a cadence that's a little different than your regular 8 to 5, corporate person. I've got people that work all night long and sleep all day. I've got people that, work in really unusual circumstances. They don't like to come to the office, but they work in coffee shops or they work from their home. Creative in the sense that you need to give them the license and the ability to express themselves in a way that is most productive for them. You need to be aware and sensitive to the needs of their creativity, I guess is the best way to say it. So creative in a sense that they're thinking probably a little bit differently than most folks is where I'm coming from.
That makes a lot of stuff. They're already analyzing the things and saying, why can't everyone see this? So thanks for that clarifying comment. My chap says that to me a lot when I'm analyzing, like, this is so obvious. This process has these outcomes, and you could prevent this by just understanding this data point. And he's looking at me like, no one would even think about that. So I see that little bit different spin when I get that glass deer in the headlight look. We only have about 1 more minute to go on the last question here. This is towards the end of the book, but you were talking about that feeling of being watched. And the context I want to take out of this is, there's one upside that says we have just the coolest data to learn, understand, and see things that we have never done before. The transparency, the volume, what we can analyze and ascertain is immense. But with that, there's a balance of both the privacy bit, the ethical bit, the once algorithms algorithms really take over the world. And I know you've talked a lot about, that the end state of mass algorithms in the book, but I'm sure you have some serious opinions about this. How do you think that we strike that right balance between using the data for its proper use and not feeling like everyone's watching your every move, but that when you do that, it's useful and not just, the watchdog approach? What are your thoughts about that, John?
Well, it's a great question. I actually started writing a book on ethics about a year ago, and then I saw 4 books come out in rapid fire, and I said, wow, this topic is well addressed, so I stopped it. So I do think a lot about ethics. I do think that the European Union with GDPR and California with the CPP law are going in the right direction. We need to give people control of their data, and when we use their data, we have to use it for ethical, honest, and straightforward purposes that we can explain and feel good about. I do think that organizations like Facebook and LinkedIn and other people would not have viable businesses if they actually paid for the data that they use to run their businesses. Their businesses are all based on us volunteering our data. That's in their entire business model. And if they had to pay for that data as a raw material, like everybody else has to pay for steel and coal and oil, I don't think those companies would be viable. And I think we're moving in that direction as people become aware of the value of data and what data can do. I think they will put pressure on governments and pressure on organizations to change how they monetize that data, how it's used, and how they react and work with individuals and consumers through the world. So the ethical nature of this conversation, this ethical dimension, is serious, and it will change how the world operates in the near future. And we as participants in it need to make our voices heard and need to make sure that what we're doing, we can hold our head up and honestly say with transparency that we're doing it for the good of the people that we're working on behalf, the corporations we work for, and the patients and consumers that we interact with.
Well, brilliantly, conveyed there, John, because that is part of the duty that we sign up for when we are granted the access to people's data. And certainly, I think that code of ethics and that stance to understand that is what we're signing on for is important for all of us. Litigation will help us along that way, regulations and those kind of things, but it's really imparted upon all of us to take that duty on as we're dealing with analytics. So I literally could talk to you for probably 3 more hours and still not run out of questions. And I haven't even covered half the chapters in the book, but I think what we'll do is just have you back on the stage again because this is brilliant, and I know more questions will continue to come in after we close. So let me just remind everybody, you can see what a great resource John is. You're not going to meet many people who have 3 decades in this business and who are so engaging and interesting to talk to. So be sure to take the opportunity to connect with him. And doing that, you never know, you might get some kind of special thing when the new book gets released later this summer. So follow along, but I'm very serious when I say that if you're in this space of analytics, watching John's posts, and you didn't pay me to say this, has been a great resource to me for research, because he must read a lot every morning, because every day you get some kind of quick takeaway and valuable resource from all kinds of different perspectives. It's not just his own. So you'll get a real leg up if you follow him on LinkedIn. And in addition to that, you'll see a couple of the resources I mentioned from our own data that we'd like to share with you, that you can leverage that and be able to begin to analyze that, incorporate that in. Those are in your digital gift bags. And reminder that you will all receive a link to this recording, and you can download those gift bag items at that time. And speaking of data, let's talk about how we're going to apply data to benchmarking and raising the business value by using benchmarking. That's going to be our next session, which is our last session of the day. We're going to give you a little bit of a break, so you're going to come back at 1 o'clock U.S. Eastern Time for that. So have a quick cup of coffee, maybe a snack, some afternoon tea, some dinner, dessert, dessert, if that's where you are in the world, join us back for that. So we're going to actually go through our own data analytics center. We have a center in Singapore. We're going to walk through some of this data and analytics that they've brought, some insights that you can gain from that specifically to the shared services, global business services, and BPO environment. So we hope to see you back for that. If you can't make it then please rejoin us again tomorrow for day 4 of the World Series, which we will have 3 sessions. And then the end of the 3rd session, we're going to look at to 2025 and where everything means. And immediately after that, I'm going to give my chairwoman's summary, some highlights, takeaways, and key quotes, of which we know one came from this session with the team sport. So we hope to see you all back in another session. We appreciate all of your contributions, both those of you attending live and those of you attending on demand. And John, this has been brilliant. Thank you so much for your help. Would you like to say goodbye to our audience?
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciated it. Hope you have a great day, evening, and I hope to see you again soon.
All right. Take care, everyone. This now concludes this webinar session.